Okay, so here is statement A. This column here, revised, everybody should sort of start being familiar with this statement A. These are the revised revenues, and these are the numbers that we've been working off of this last month or so. The changes include here, and I highlight both of these two numbers here, with the additional givebacks from the Board of Education and the town. Those have been incorporated into these unexpended, these two line items here. So Kristen, now if you would like to make a motion to accept the revised revenues, I would be happy to entertain that.
I make a motion to accept the revised revenues.
Now, second that.
Thank you, Bob DePietro, for seconding that. Do we have any other further discussion on the revised revenues for this current fiscal year? So fiscal year 1920. I'm sort of just, the rest of this looks the same. The only thing that has changed from the last time you saw this document, like I said, are the two give back numbers. Okay.
Excuse me.
Yes, who's?
Bob Monroe. Question actually for Bob Moore, if he's still on.
Yes.
Regards to the additional 125, obviously that is welcome. My one question would be, did this arise from something different than past years? Or was this a function of like one area, i.e. highways?
No.
Now let's Sandy's on, so she can.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll let Sandy answer that. If Sandy, you
Yeah.
want to take it?
Actually, we took a hard look at what the expenditures actually were for the town after 1 month of basically not using town facilities and having all of our employees work from home. That resulted in about a $50,000 savings for the rest of the fiscal year. And then we actually did get our state police overtime bill finally.
Okay.
For extra security that we had them doing at the Bolton Center School for the month of March. And we were afraid that would come in around $100,000. It actually came in slightly under 30.
Oh, wow.
And that and a few other here and there kind of expenditures is where the money's coming from.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I'm happy to hear that it was one-time things that, i.e. the state police overtime, that resulted in that. It makes it much more understandable for me. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other questions on the revised revenues? Okay. Just as here's some background noise that I'm not sure who it's coming from. So if you're not speaking, if you don't mind just muting your microphone, just so that it's not so distracting. I appreciate that. Perfect. Thank you. Are there any other comments on the revised revenues? Otherwise, I have a motion on the floor and we will go to a vote.
Could you just catch me up in 20 words or less?
Dick, welcome.
Thank you.
Quick summary. The Board of Education was at their last meeting last week, was able to contribute an additional $40,000 towards next year's budget. And the town was able to, at their meeting last night, is giving back an additional $125,000. So what we have at the motion on the floor right now is to accept the revised revenues for this current fiscal year And that includes all of the givebacks. I've sort of highlighted on your screen as to what those now total. And that's sort of where we are. Once we have voted on the revised revenues, then we will discuss next year's proposed budget and how we can deal with that.
So if we don't accept the revised revenues, they will form part of what we start with next year. Is that the idea?
If we do not accept these revised revenues, we can't adopt a budget tonight. We would have to come up with there is some revised revenues that we have to accept tonight in order to adopt a budget tonight.
Why is that?
Just how it works. These numbers here flow into next year's budget. So the two numbers that I've highlighted here will then flow into this bottom line of cash available from this year into next year's budget. So we can't determine next year's budget because that works into the revenues of next year's budget without having accepted the revised revenues first. It's what we've done. That's what we do every year. We just have been putting this part off until now.
Okay. My impression was that when we went to hearing, the revenue projections were fixed and anything else that came in was to go forward for the following year. But you're saying no. I don't recall having done this before, accepting revenues after the hearing.
Yeah, Emily, this is Sandy, if I can make a comment.
Yes, please.
I don't think you need to revise the revenues from last year because that's already been accepted and passed. What you need to accept is the fact that the 225 and the 165 are going to be available to flow to the fiscal year 2021 budget as unexpended funds from this year's budget. And to Dick's point about accepting the revenues, you can change revenues after the public hearing. You cannot change it after the revenues, after the referendum.
Right.
So if the Board of Finance accepts the budget tonight, it's done.
So, Sandy and Emily, did I hear you correctly that there will be no referendum?
That is correct. The Board of Selectmen last night voted to authorize the Board of Finance to be the decision-making body. We had previously done that, but reserved the right to schedule a referendum. And the governor issued an executive order last Friday that basically said no referendums, no town meetings. And if you've already held one, you're fine, but none in the future.
So if we accept these revenues, the likely mill rate will go down by about 0.8.
Dick, we're going to have that conversation next because of the quantity of these unexpended funds. It makes us have a different conversation about what our final bottom line is. So if you can hold that part of it.
I understand, but I mean,
so in theory,
rocket science to understand that we're probably going to have a 38.2 mill rate instead of a 39 mill rate if we accept these.
If we accept these, we have a couple different options on how we want to go. And that can range from, 38 something to up to 39 if we want it. So again, I mean,
okay.
I can jump to that, but if we can.
I mean, it's germane. It bears on how you might vote whether to accept it or not.
two separate things. So this is just what is the total amount flowing to next year. The second discussion will be then what is the total expenditures that we want to take forward for the budget. I was going to say to referendum, but that's for our budget. And that will, our conversation can be what exactly is our contingency level? What are the, what do we want that end mill rate to be?
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Apologize too, by the way. I have 2/3 of my Zoom meetings, which have been at 7:30, and this is the one that's at 7:15.
No worries. Okay. Any further discussion on these revenues? I've got a motion on the floor. Then I'm just going to go by roll call. If we could have yay or nay. Bob Monroe. I can't hear you. Sorry. Can
Yay.
you unmute? Okay. Dick Tuthill.
Aye.
Kristen Gorley.
Aye.
Ross Lally.
Aye.
Charlie Dana.
Aye.
Bob DiPietro.
Aye.
And Emily Bradley, aye. Okay, that passes. Now, if I can, I'm going to stop sharing that. As Sandy had said, the governor has stated that there will not be a referendum. And so we are moving forward with the Board of Finance adopting the final budget. So let's talk about next year's budget. And if you give me just 1 second, I have couple scenarios. So if you recall, at the end of our last meeting, we needed an additional $70,000 to get us to the $250,000 contingency level. Board of Ed has contributed an additional $40,000 and the town an additional $125,000.
Point of information.
Yes.
We needed an extra $90,000. We were sitting at a contingency fund of 160.
If you recall, we weren't sure if it was 70 or 90, and Josh had done some quick math saying with the revised
Okay.
grand
Understood.
list.
Yeah.
So he did confirm, he and Jill
That's right.
confirmed it was only 70 that we
I
needed.
agree.
Okay. So if you do that math, if we had the contingency at the 250,000, which is what we went into public hearing with, we really needed, we now have $95,000 sort of left, and we can decide a couple different things that we can do with that. I just want to paint out a couple scenarios. So if you don't mind, just I can try to follow along and let me paint, and then we can talk about what it is that we want to do. So scenario number one is we've already made a reduction to the Board of Ed of $60,000 and to the town $30,000. If we have our contingency level at $250,000, all of that leftover unexpended funds can go back into reducing our tax ask. That is a mill rate of approximately is a mill rate of 38.78. So that's scenario one. Scenario two, we have $95,000. We had cut both the town and the Board of Ed, their budgets, by a total of $90,000. We could take back those reductions, still keeping our contingency at $250,000, and take that additional $5,000 and reduce our mill rate. And that gives us a mill rate of 38.99. One of the things that I do want to share, at the Board of Selectmen's meeting last night, they did discuss, well, how would they deal with a $30,000 cut? And they in their, and Sandy, please correct me if I'm misstating this. They in their discussions figured out how to handle 25,000 of that. So really it's, they haven't totally figured out what to do with the other 5,000, but there are, you know, they feel that they can absorb the 25,000 by doing a few things. And I'm not going to go into details of that because that's, I wasn't there for all of that conversation, but so scenario 3 is sort of somewhere between 1 and 2. If we say that the town reduction is not the 30,000 that we originally laid out, but is only 25,000 because they've already figured out how to handle that. So we've now backed off on that reduction and back off on the Board of Ed reduction halfway. That gives us, and again, leaving our contingency level at $250,000, that leaves us with a mill rate of 38.86. Okay, sort of the fourth scenario that I was thinking is if we, again, contingency level at $250,000, the town reduction is only 25,000, and we eliminate the Board of Ed reduction, so they don't have any reduction to their ask. That leaves us with a mill rate of 38.93. So to summarize, scenario 1 is leave the cuts in place, put it all back, all goes back into reducing the tax levy. So that gives us our lowest mill rate. Scenario 2 is gives us our highest mill rate because we make no cuts to the town or the Board of Ed. And then scenario 3 and 4 are just different variations between those two. There are obviously lots of other scenarios, but as I was thinking through what I had heard from this board, as well as what I had heard from the public hearing, the comfort level of a $250,000 contingency was pretty high, that felt like the right number if we could achieve that, which is why the scenarios that I ran here all have that $250,000, because we can fund that and be able to do a few other things. I know I see a couple hands raised, and I apologize, since I'm sharing screen, I don't see all of them. So I've got Scott Rich. Question.
I mean, to your point, so why are there no options that have a smaller contingency, since it seemed that there was a lot of discussion about with the board last week that there were a number of people who thought that 250 was too high.
I think if I heard correctly, and I might be wrong, so you know, obviously anybody from the Board of Finance chime in. When we didn't have enough to fund a 250, the discussion was, well, where would we take that from? And I think the comfort for most people was to take it out of contingency, as opposed to cutting or leaving a tax. So
Can I reply to that?
Yes, Dick.
Yeah, that immediately occurred to me too, Scott. So I was thinking in the other column, you could leave the reductions the way they were, bring the contingency down to 180, and reduce the tax levy by the entire amount of the increased revenue. That would bring you down to a 38.2 or so mill rate.
So if I was to, so basically,
we were kind of forced into punting last week because we didn't know what the true size of the contingency would be without a tax increase, and it had been at 160, but it's now at 180 if we have no additional revenues applied to it. Tax
Josh,
levy
do you-
reduced would be the total of what you had before, showed on the other screen before. The new revenues that we,
So it'd be 165.
no, it's 165 plus, right?
No, 165.
Is that all it is 165?
Yes.
The total,
Yeah, it would
the
be
total?
two
Okay,
new items.
so that would
because-
be 38.6 or so. Just doing rough numbers in my head. Pardon?
About 38.66.
38.66. Yeah,
Emily, it's Jill. I'm sorry, what is the scenario again? You want to change contingency to,
back to 180,
okay,
leave the cuts in place.
okay,
I take the additional revenues and reduce taxes with them.
okay. Let me see what I can do.
Okay. So that is another option.
We think it would result in a 38.66, but Jill's gonna make the final number.
Okay, Bob Monroe, you have your hand up.
I think Charlie and Krista were before me, if you want us to stay in order.
Okay, I don't have an order of who raised their hand first. So if
Okay.
you're willing to do that, then Charlie?
Thank you. When it seemed to me when we discussed it in the last meeting, we had kind of accepted that the reduced contingency fund was that number that we were shooting for. So with that in mind, that's exactly what I was thinking when we were talking about this sudden increase monies and give back, that if we would leave that reduced contingency amount as we had imagined it, that we could use that towards lowering the mill rate, which is essentially what Dick just was talking about. So I'm good with where Dick is now.
Okay, so this scenario number 5, put it that way, if we do that.
Yes.
Kristen Gorley.
So a couple of things to consider. First off, we had spoken about just historically when we were in this situation during the last recession and the bond rating. We do have some things coming up. It was looked at as being favorable to have a contingency fund at $250,000. And I think all of us originally at some point, and I understand people are wavering now, we're comfortable with that number. The other thing to consider is if we give all this money and put it, or the majority of it, and put it straight towards the mill rate, we have the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen that, gave these funds. And I would hate to see us in a position where, again, we want to be prepared. I think we have this window of opportunity to prepare for somewhat of the unknown with what's happening as far as the impact due to COVID-19. So I still support having $250,000 into that contingency fund, but I am all up for putting the rest of the money into reducing the mill rate.
Thank you, Kristen. I actually just want to, I know that I've got Bob Monroe, whose hand's up, and thank you for being patient. I did want to just remind the Board of Finance, Kristen Hecht had shared in an email on, was that Thursday or Friday, just a couple of changes that she has been made aware of from a Board of Ed perspective, a special education component that they didn't budget for that is now known. That's about $57,000, and a concern about they had eliminated one teacher, and with distance learning, wondering if there's going to be a learning regression that is going to require additional teacher support and possibly hiring that teacher that they had cut in those lower, I think it was like kindergarten, first grade levels. So that was an email I think everybody saw, just as something to keep in mind as well, as those are two things that have now been sort of added to the education budget for next year. Okay. Bob Monroe. I can't hear you, Bob. Can you unmute?
Sorry, trying to be a good boy. My position initially, as we went into this, was to return to a $250,000 contingency. Coupled with that, I wanted to hopefully see us achieve a 0 increase in the mill rate, no tax increase. When we found out the numbers were a little bit lower than that, and would not support the $250,000 contingency with no tax increase, I reconsidered my position after I had heard from some other townspeople, and had suggested we go with a lower contingency. At the time in that meeting, we were discussing about 160. Then additional monies were going to become available as a consequence of Jill and Josh's diligence in continuing to look at the numbers, in particular in regards to the grand list. So as we closed the books on last meeting, we were looking, at least in my mind, believed that we would be looking at a contingency of about 180,000 and no tax increase. The information from both these boards is very welcome and virtually unprecedented to my knowledge. And I think that there should be a certain amount of fairness attached to it. So I definitely endorse going back to the $250,000 contingency and no tax increase. So that remains as far as what we do with the boards that, we had already made reductions to. It sounds like it was a very positive Board of Selectmen meeting. And that even reducing the $30,000 previous reduction to the Board of Selectmen to 25 would be amenable with them. I understand the rationale for the possibility of reducing the Board of Ed reduction from 60,000 to nothing, compared to some maybe new information, but again, we don't know. So it's not like it's a foregone conclusion that those additional monies would be needed at this point. Things may change, and now we have a $250,000 contingency to adjust that. So I would think some adjustment down in the Board of Education reduction from 60 to 30 would be appropriate, and the 20 and down to 25 for the town side, leaving us with a contingency of 250,000. And a slight reduction in the mill rate is just a rather fantastic place to be. That's where I would be looking to settle.
Okay. Kristen Gorley, is that a new hand up or?
Might I raise a point of information? Would the chair
Yeah.
accept that?
Yes.
So what Bob just said is interesting, and I think it deserves its own column. Could we fill that in?
What he
We're going forward.
described actually is scenario 3.
Is that fully what you're
Mhm.
you're advocating for scenario 3?
That what Bob
Yes.
Monroe just described, if I'm heard you correctly, Bob Monroe, is what I have highlighted here as scenario 3. So
That would be
a
correct.
reduction in both the Board of Ed and town reduction to the reductions, a $250,000 contingency, and then the rest of it going towards reducing the mill rate.
Correct.
Okay.
And Emily, I think Ross had his hand up before I did.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Ross.
Yeah, actually, this is a question. Josh, I need some information from you or Jill. How much have both the Board of Education and the town given back typically at the end of each year unspent?
I don't have those numbers in front of me right now. I can work with Jill right now offline while you continue discussions to try and.
Yeah, if you could, because what I'm just going to pose is I got the feeling from being the new person here that I think at a couple other meetings we've mentioned that the town and the Board of Education have typically given back some monies at the end of each year. Is that true?
That is true. Typically,
That's
they,
definitely true, yes.
I
So
don't
what
have the
I am,
figures.
yeah, so, and how big is our contingency fund been every year recently? I've seen $25,000 and some other figures.
It has been, historically, it was $25,000. We raised it to be 100 and something one year because the state didn't have a budget. Last year we had it at 91,000 for a couple things that we weren't sure we were going to. Plus, we had the teacher retirement, so that's kind of also part of the contingency.
Okay. I'll just cut to the chase and just say I manage budgets at work, and I'm just saying it looks like both, being prudent, both the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education kind of bake in a little bit of contingency into their budgets, just as I do at work. And so, given the fact that that's probably already baked into their budgets, we've got $250,000 up here. I really don't have any problem on here with scenario one. And I think it also is beholden as we go forward into next year to really dig into much more efficiencies with shared services between Board of Education and Board of Selectmen, whether we start at the administrative level or whatever. And so I think if you go with something like scenario one, we're holding our faith with the voters. And, the townspeople are concerned about increased taxes. And we're also just saying that we really have to start getting serious about some shared services and such. When I say town, I don't think of like the Board of Selectmen. I mean the town, which consists of all of us taxpayers and the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education. So this is a little bit more, of a philosophical thing on my point, where I'm kind of going with the scenario one because that's a good size contingency on it. And we're also, recognizing, that these are difficult times for the people here who are our taxpayers. So that's kind of what, that's, my take.
Okay, thank you, Ross. Kristen Gorley.
Well, you know what, I just lowered my hand because I saw that it looks like there's a member or two from the Board of Education that would like to speak. And I think it is important to hear from both boards on this, just because, there was transparency with giving the money back. So I would like to be, and I'm interested in having them weigh in. So I'm just going to reserve my comment at the moment.
Okay. Thank you. I'm scrolling through my little thing here to see whose hands are raised. Chris Davey. Chris, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Emily. Yes, I just wanted to respond to Mr. Monroe's comment that the increased amount of spending that Kristen had projected, the Superintendent Hecht had projected for the fall school year, it's not something that might happen or might not happen. That is an expense that will definitely happen. It's a placement that it's a change in placement for a particular student. So we know that that cost will be incurred, and it is not in the budget that we originally presented to the Board of Finance. So I would just leave that for your consideration and suggest that.
Chris, just to clarify, that is the special ed, the new special ed that is $57,000. That
That is
are we?
correct.
Okay, 57,340 was the number that Superintendent Heck sent us. Okay, thank you.
Right, and if I could, I would also like to point out that all Board of Ed budgets are, we start from a zero-based budgeting process. So we don't cook into our budgets, any sort of $250,000 overage, or, we don't cook into it funds that we don't think that we are going to need. We come up with a good faith budget based on what the staff sees in front of them at the time they are preparing the budget. And so
I'm wondering if the gentleman would accept a point of information.
yes.
Thank you. So historically, certain line items have returned a lot of money, either in the form of transfers out or money given back at the end of the year. And so I understand your statement about zero-based budgeting, but that doesn't seem to be the case unless your basis of estimates are pretty conservatively on the generous side. So would you care to address that point?
I'm not sure.
Chris, can I speak to that? This is Kristen Hecht.
Yes, please. Why don't you do that, Kristen?
Thank you. I appreciate it. So Dick, to your point, so when we budget based on the actuals that are in front of us. So if we have a teacher that tells us in the information that we seek in the fall that they're retiring and they have to notify us by a date in December, so we have that information to budget for. It depends on the position, what we put in the budget for that number. For example, if it is for a science teacher, generally we're going to budget quite high for that because that is an area of durational shortage and science teachers are very hard to come by. So the likelihood is you're not getting someone new coming out of school who are less expensive than a more experienced teacher. The likelihood is you might be getting a teacher who's very experienced from someplace else and costs a lot more money. It may also be true that if we are budgeting for, say, an elementary teacher, we would budget much less. However, oftentimes when a teacher is retiring, they are retiring either at a single insurance number or at maximum a double insurance number. And we have to budget for family insurance in order to be able to offer that to a new employee should they need to require family insurance. And we sometimes even take gambles and might budget a double for one of those positions in the hopes that we might get one that's a double. We have had success over the past several years when we've had retirements that we have found some amazing teachers who maybe weren't at a higher step than we potentially budgeted for and ended up taking, say, family or single or double insurance, but we had budgeted family because we have to prudently budget that because we don't know what someone will take, nor can we tell them what they have to take. So I want to be clear on that because those are, I'd like to finish, please. Those are areas where we have given back money over the years. And we've also had the benefit of in our insurance line where people go off of our insurance at times during the year. And we haven't been in the scenario where people have been coming on to our insurance in a way that we hadn't budgeted for. So that's been to our benefit, but we've been lucky with that. We already know of two that are coming on, changing their insurance from single to family or double to family that just happened as a result of open enrollment. And there's still outliers that we're not going to know about as discussed previously with the result of this whole situation. The other piece is special education, which is something that changes every month, to be quite honest, for us. And so we budget on the best information that we have. We have some amazing programs that we have put in place in district to address the needs of special education students to the extent we can. But there are students who require outplacements, and there are students during the year that require changes in placements. We've been able to do a really good job, and that is really to Beth Goldsnyder's credit, our Director of Student Support Services and HR, and what she has done to put programs in place. But changes do happen. It's been to our benefit for several years now, but that isn't always the case. And as of right now, we have this known change. So we don't budget placeholders for insurance for additional insurance changes. Other districts do that all the time, to the point that Ross made about padding the budget. We've agreed that we won't do that. The only placeholders we have for insurance is for new hires. And as for the rest of it, it is based on actuals, the information that we have in front of us in January. Thank you for letting me finish.
All good points, but the track record speaks for itself. And Bob Monroe would be happy to tell you what the track record is offline. And the track record indicates that you're accepting virtually no risk at all. Okay, and that's not the way budgeting should be done.
So Dick, if I could just interject for a minute. I think that, I mean, what both boards have told us is that they're building the budgets from the bottom up, and there are no placeholders from there. And there are things that change throughout the year that have worked to their favors and worked against them. And in cases where things have worked to their favor, they've used that to offset the things that have worked against them. And I think both boards have been very good at trying to manage to those numbers. And at the end of each year have been able to give us back funds. I mean, just look at the conversation that we're having tonight. We were actually able to have an additional $165,000 problem. It's a great problem to have to put towards next budget. I apologize. Well, sorry. Somebody else in the house hopefully will pick that up, but I doubt it. Yes. Okay, somebody has picked it up. I apologize. So I think from a, as we are going through our discussions tonight, we had originally put out a couple of cuts, trying to narrow us down to where we wanted to be. And I think we need to sort of continue with that same thought. If there is some additional research that we would like to do as a Board of Finance in terms of givebacks from both the town and the Board of Education over the years, I know Chris Davey, I think, had done some initial research on that. I would be happy to take that on, over the summer and see if we can, get some historical perspective on that. Bob DiPietro, your hand is up. Oh, and then I also see Bob Mora. So Bob DiPietro.
Okay. I like scenario 3 that Bob Monroe outlined and went over. I think it's fair. I think it will reflect a slight decrease that Bob Mora spoke about earlier. And certainly keeps the 250,000 in the contingency, which, considering all the possible complications that might occur, likely to occur as a result of COVID-19 or any other thing, I think that makes the most sense. I think I'm going to go forward with scenario 3, and I think that'll be acceptable under the circumstances. Enough.
Thank you, Bob. I'm going to lower your hand. There we go. Okay. Oh, Bob Mora.
very briefly. Just a point, if you look at scenario 1 and scenario 3, I think the one thing that stands out to me in both those cases, the cuts, if you will, that were done to the Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen, should things go sour, using a $250,000 contingency, I think you're in good shape to cover. I mean, should the Board of Ed, I know that special ed thing moves around like a moving target, but should they have issues, I think you've covered that in your contingency. So and then same with the 30,000 on the Board of Selectmen. Should that happen to us, I think you've got the monies there set aside for that. So I think the conservative side would be 1, the less conservative side would be scenario 3. And I think you have both the town and the board protected, and also you're considering the taxpayer. Thank you for allowing me to come.
Thank you, Bob. Also, I mean, to just one other point, the agreement that we have with the Board of Education, if there is a situation where we do have a significant change in special education, a new placement coming into town, and if the education budget cannot cover that they can come and ask the Board of Finance to help with that, and that agreement still stands. So regardless of how we end up tonight, Superintendent Kristen Hecht, if that does come to fruition, and it sounds like it will, and we have an issue, then I know you never like to come and ask, but the offer, that is still an acceptable solution. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that agreement still stands. Okay. Ross, I see your hand is up.
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
Nope, I forgot to take it down, or you forgot to lower it. I'm just listening.
I haven't been lowering hands. I'm looking for people to lower their own hands, but that's
Nope.
that's quite all right.
Nope, just listening. Thank you.
Okay. Dick Tuttle, is your hand up?
Yes, it is. I just want
Okay.
to say very briefly that I support scenario 1 with Ross.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to lower your hand, Dick. There we go. Does anybody else have their hand raised that I do not see? I just want to make sure that everybody has had a chance to talk through. Okay, so we've sort of talked through 5 different scenarios on how we can lay out the budget for next year. Each one has a slight variation on where the town and education will end up in their final budget, what the contingency level is, and therefore what the resulting mill rate is. What we are looking for tonight is to come up with an agreement as to which of these scenarios we are going to go forward with. And I think we've had some good discussions on where people's thoughts are. Other than, I guess, myself, so I guess I can share where my thoughts are. I personally would like to see the contingency at $250,000. At that higher level. I think there are so many unknowns that make me really uncomfortable that I want to make sure that we have ourselves covered. And given the fact that we already know that there are a few changes, new things within the education world, I am comfortable with, reducing the original cut. And so I am leaning towards, my preference would be scenario 3. I think it's in between. I think we have also shown that we can lower the mill rate and work with that. Kristen Gorley, your hand went up.
Yeah, just to throw out a couple of numbers, and I think we all seem to be arriving at the same place with the contingency at 250,000, which I am very comfortable with. And why actually I'm leaning towards scenario 3, just throwing some numbers out. We already know that, you know, special education, that's going to be about 57,000, and that's a new development. And then, you know, one of the reasons why we got so much money back from the Board of Selectmen is because we had another unprecedented situation over at the center school that we were expecting was going to cost about $100,000, I believe. So you're already up to $157,000. It goes quickly. And I think looking at the different scenarios, especially with the Board of Education, I would hate to see their budget get just wiped out. I'm much more comfortable, I think, with the 30,000 reduction as opposed to the 60,000. So that's just my take. So I'm more comfortable with scenario 3 as well.
Okay, thank you, Kristen.
So I would like to move that we adopt scenario 3.
Is that a motion, Bob DiPietro?
I second that motion.
Okay, so Bob DiPietro made the motion of scenario 3, which is a total Board of Ed reduction of $30,000, a town reduction of $25,000, a contingency level of $250,000, and the rest of it going to reduce the tax levy, giving us a total expenditures of $22,908,544. Motion is on the floor. Discussion. Bob Monroe.
We're in an enviable situation, and not the least of which I want to just stress the commitment that you see from the Board of Selectmen, Sandy and Bob and the rest of the group there, and the Board of Education. Terrific cooperation, in my opinion, to try to keep us on the straight and narrow in a very difficult and uncertain situation. I think scenario 3 covers all that, all those bases. It clicks all the boxes for me, and it sounds like it does for a number of other people. And, you know, I am much appreciative of the additional information from the Board of Ed in regards to, you know, special ed and that ever-changing landscape. But, you know, we've always said, as you mentioned, Emily, that we have that scenario covered. If there, you know, is a problem, even in excess of the 30,000, let's say we backed off of the reduction on, which would appear that it would be, but I'm confident in other things working out in a positive manner. I think for us to be in a situation where we can actually have a slight decrease in our taxes, I think it's important to keep the perspective that brings us, if we're at a slight decrease of 0.14, we're over the last 4 years average, we're going to be looking at less than 0.5% average increase in taxes for the last 4 years. I think that's phenomenal, and a testament to both boards and how they handle their business. So I did want to just get that in there before we take a vote. You know where I'm coming from, and I just am very appreciative of all the effort that's gone into both boards to get us to this point. I just think it's great.
Thank you, Bob. Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? I'm just scrolling through. I see no further hands raised, and hearing no other discussion, then I'm going to call for a vote via roll call. If you could please say yay or nay, or abstain, That's your choice. I'm going to start Kristen Gorley,
Yay.
Bob DiPietro,
Could unmute Bob.
I'm Bob DiPietro.
Yeah.
Sorry, yay. Okay. Bob Monroe,
Yay.
Dick Tuttle,
No,
Ross Lally,
No.
Charlie Dana,
Yay.
Emily Bradley, yay. It passes 4-2. Dick Tuttle and Ross Lally voted no. Okay.
4-2 or 5-2?
Sorry, say that again, Dick.
4-2 or 5-2?
5-2.
Thank you.
Yes, I can count. Okay. Then the last thing, give me 1 second. Then the last thing we need to do is, do you still see the same document up, or did it switch to a different document?
I'm seeing the one with scenario 3 and now nothing.
Okay, so then the last item is to, Josh, just tell me what the final mill rate on that one was. Was that the 38.86?
Yes, it was. 38.86.
Okay. Then the final thing that we need for is item number 5 is I need a motion that basically reads this. And that's sort of the final step. So can I have a motion for the annual budget of the town of Bolton, Connecticut for the fiscal year 2021 as recommended by the Board of Finance in the amount of $22,908,544 be adopted?
I make a motion.
So Kristen made the motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
I heard Bob DiPietro and somebody else. I don't.
And me as well, but that's fine.
Okay. Bob, you can pick which Bob you want to second that because we've got 2 of them. Okay. Motion on the floor is this is the budget that we are going to adopt. Is there any further discussion on this? Okay, hearing none, then I, by roll call, am going to ask for a vote. Kristen Gorley,
Yay.
Bob DiPietro,
Yay.
Bob Monroe,
Yay.
Dick Tuttle,
No,
Ross Lally,
No.
Charlie Dana,
Yay.
Emily Bradley, yay. Okay. We have a budget for next fiscal year. As everybody is aware, there is no referendum. And Sandy, correct me if I'm wrong, by making this adoption tonight, given the authority that you gave us last night, this is the budget that is going forward, correct?
That is correct. The only duty left for the Board of Finance is to set the mill rate.
Which we could do now based on what we know, or we could do that at our May 21st meeting. I don't think it matters either way.
It's not on the agenda.
It's not on the agenda, so I can't do it tonight.
It's a special meeting.
Because it's a special meeting and we didn't put it on the agenda, therefore we cannot talk about it. So one of the items that will be on our May 21st Board of Finance meeting will be based on this budget that we just adopted to set the mill rate. And right now what this calculates out to be is 38.86 as our mill rate. So we will decide that, we will vote on that on our May 21st meeting. I wanted to say thank you to both boards for digging in your pockets. I was hoping that by asking the question of, is there anything else, that we would get to the $70,000 that we would need just to keep the mill rate flat. So I can tell you that I was very happily surprised when both boards were able to come back and give us more than that. As someone had said, it's kind of a good problem to be faced with at the moment. I feel that we have put out a budget that will keep our town, and by town, I mean the whole town, including education, moving forward, that we're going to provide all of the services to our townspeople, to our children, but still being fiscally responsible, preparing for what we have no idea what's coming down the road. And, you know, keeping that one eye on the future for this coming year, but also for future years, since we do know that there's some big projects that we're going to have to bond. So this keeps us, I think, in a good light on all of those fronts. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Board of Selectmen. Thank you, Board of Education, for sitting through all these meetings and working with us and making this happen. Are there any other final comments before I adjourn this meeting?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. Thank you.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
And also to Josh and Jill too. Thank you very much for the support. You guys have been wonderful, as well as both boards.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Then I guess this meeting is adjourned.
All right, well done.
I will
Thanks.
see the Board of Finance members May 12th. Remember, next Tuesday night, Dick Tuttle, actually you weren't on the call, Dick Tuttle, the Board of Finance is meeting with the Charter Revision Committee on the 12th at 7 p.m. They will send out a Zoom invite, and then our next meeting is May 21st. Our normal meeting. And just as a reminder, that's a regular meeting, so we will have minutes from all of these meetings that need to be reviewed and approved. So if you could read them beforehand, that will make it go a little bit faster. Thank you. Then I say, have a great evening, everybody. Enjoy this fabulous weather we're not having. I'll see you around.
Emily, are you back here now?
Yes, I am back in Connecticut.
Okay.